Jake here with Extreme Terrain, and today I'm taking a look at the Rough Country 2-inch suspension lift kit fitting 2021 and newer Broncos without the Sasquatch package, excluding Badlands, First Edition, Raptor, and Wild Track models. If you're looking to get some extra height for your Bronco, whether it's for the purpose of increasing your off-road capability, fitting larger wheels and tires, or just making the whole thing look a little more mean, then this kit from Rough Country is a great way to make all of those things happen. This is a bolt-on kit with new springs and shocks in the form of struts that makes the process straightforward, and it's also going to keep your budget intact. Whatever your reasoning for wanting to lift your Bronco may be, this is a pretty cool setup that's worth considering. So it is a 2-inch lift kit that also functions as a leveling kit. So you get a 2 true inches of lift in the front end and slightly less in the rear to help even out the stance and eliminate that forward brake that the Bronco has from the factory. Now this is going to give you the ability to fit up to 35-inch tires without having to make other modifications. Any larger than that, or if you have a really wide wheel or one with an aggressive offset, you may have to do a little bit of trimming, but for the most part, 35s are going to fit without issue. Now, unlike a lot of other lift kits in this price range, this one features fully assembled struts in both the front and rear in the form of Rough Country's N3 premium struts. Now, these are going to be larger than your factory struts, and that's what's going to give you that 2 inches of lift that we were talking about. And as you can see, they come pre-assembled. All of them come out of the box just like you see them right here. So there's no need to mess with spring compressors or anything like that. Just take your old ones out, bolt these guys right in. Now the shocks inside are Rough Country's N3s, and these are nitrogen charged and feature infinitely variable damping, so it's going to give you a nice smooth, almost stock ride quality. But these are specifically designed for lifted applications. Now the damping is tuned to keep that ride smooth on the road, while still doing a good job of absorbing impacts and controlling rebound out on the trail. That nitrogen charging helps with heat dissipation as well, so even under really aggressive off-road conditions or a lot of up and down, the shocks are not going to suffer from fade. That means you can use them to their full extent without having to worry about them fading or losing control. And since these are, again, pre-assembled struts, they're paired with larger springs to help compensate for that additional height. So these are going to be a more appropriate spring rate for a lifted setup. And again, since they're a fully assembled strut, you get all new top hats and bushings on the bottoms as well in both the front and rear. The struts feature this massive 1 3/8 inch bore and have a hardened chrome piston rod inside, so they're going to stand up quite well to the elements too. The bodies, as you can see, are finished in a nice silver paint for good looks and durability. The springs are also powder coated black for extra durability as well. And like I mentioned a moment ago, you get all new rubber bushings and mounts on the bottoms, and you get new top hats both front and rear as well, making for a nice refresh to your struts. And again, it's going to be an easy installation. Pricing is going to come in around $850, making this the most affordable option for a suspension lift kit that includes springs and shocks. It's a great way to get some lift and improve suspension performance for a really reasonable price, and the N3s have been very popular with our customers for quite some time. I think if you get these on your Bronco, you're going to see why. Installation is going to get a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter and should take you around 2 hours to complete. Now this is a pretty straightforward job, certainly one that you can tackle yourself. You're going to need to do some disassembly to get the new struts in, and keep in mind that they are larger than your originals, so as with any lift, make sure you're taking your time and plan to get a proper alignment done once everything has had a chance to settle. But with that, let's head out to the shop where we'll walk you through that process step by step.
Tools required for this install include a couple different size impact guns, a ratchet, a hammer, 13, 14, 15, and 21 millimeter ratcheting wrenches, 18 and 30 millimeter wrench, a Phillips head screwdriver, an extension, a swivel adapter, a 6 millimeter Allen socket, 15, 18, 19, 24, and 27 millimeter sockets, a pry bar, and pole jacks or jack stands. What's up guys? Today we're installing a lift kit on our Bronco, so let's get started. So to remove your factory strut in the front, there's an easy and a hard way to do it. The hard way requires disconnecting pretty much everything to remove the whole knuckle. Now since we're lifting the car and we're going to need an alignment anyway, I'm going to drop the lower control arm from the pivot points, and then that way we can slide our strut out. So first we're going to remove our sway bar end link. We've got a 21 millimeter nut that we'll get a 21 millimeter ratcheting wrench on, and then an Allen stud that we can get a 6 mil Allen socket on to hold our stud. And then you can do that same thing on the other side. Now once you have your end links unbolted from both sides, you can take a pry bar to lift up on your sway bar to pull that out of the lower control arm. Next we can remove our sway bar. We've got two 18mm nuts and two 18mm bolts. I've got a buddy on the other side supporting the weight of the sway bar while we remove it. So I've got an 18mm socket to pop these out. Next we can take an 18mm socket to remove our two lower strut nuts. So now we're ready to unbolt the two bolts holding in our lower control arm. Now we have these alignment plates here. So I'm going to take a Sharpie and just make a mark so that we can line this up after we get everything put back together. Now this isn't going to be perfect, but it's going to be good enough to get you to the alignment shop. So I'm just going to follow the center mark. And then you'll do the same thing on the other side of both of these. So now we can remove our bolts. We're going to be using a 21mm wrench on the bolt side and a 24mm socket on the nut side. Now I've got a couple pole jacks here to raise up our lower control arm so that we can get our bolts out. If you're doing this on the ground, you can use a jack. And then we can remove our pole jacks and wiggle this down out of the way. Next we can go up top and take a 15mm ratcheting wrench to remove our three upper strut nuts. And now with all those nuts removed, we can slide the strut downwards and out of place. And then you can do that same thing on the other side. So now we're ready to install our new strut. So we're going to get this up into our upper mount and get our nuts on top first. Next we can install our new lower strut bolts with a flat washer on each side. And then we'll get our lower control arm up to meet those studs. And then we can put another flat washer and a lock nut on the other end of our studs. And now we can take a 19mm socket and 18mm wrench to tighten these down. Next we can raise our lower control arm back up into the mounts. I've got a couple pole jacks here to do this. If you're doing this on the ground, you can use a jack. Now once we have it raised up into place, we can reinstall our bolts. You might need to get a pry bar in there to help line it up. Now we'll just line that up with our alignment mark. And then you'll reinstall your plate on the other side and your nut. Now I'm just gonna grab a hammer, tap it the rest of the way through. And now we can slide our plate back on and we'll rotate our nut to get that in place. And then we can thread our nut back on. And then we'll hold this in the correct alignment position with our 21mm wrench. And then we'll tighten our nut down with our 24mm socket. And then we'll do that same thing on the other side. Get our alignment mark lined up, and then tighten it down. Now we can go back up top and take a 15mm ratcheting wrench to tighten down our nuts. Now at this point, you can repeat that same process on the other side, and then once you're caught up, we can reinstall our sway bar. So now we're ready to reinstall our sway bar. I've got my buddy on the other side to help me lift it, and we'll reinstall our bolts and nuts. So now with our bolts threaded into place, we can take an 18mm socket to tighten this down. Next, you're going to want to get your end link lined up on both sides so that you can pry down on your sway bar and get them both in the hole at the same time. Now I've already got the other side lined up in the hole with this one. So now you can take a pry bar, pry down on your sway bar, and thread on your nut. And now you can grab your 21mm ratcheting wrench and 6mm Allen socket and tighten down the nut. And then you can do that same thing on the other side. Now, if you're planning on running bigger tires with this lift kit, it is recommended that you remove the two crash bars in the front. They both have two 15mm bolts, so you can take a 15mm ratcheting wrench to remove. So now we'll take that 15mm ratcheting wrench and remove our two bolts. And then with those bolts removed, we can slide this out of the way. And now we can do the same thing for the two bolts on our front crash bar. And now before we pull this out, we are gonna have to loosen up the bolts on our front bumper to be able to slide that forward to pull this out. So now with our front bumper, we can pull back this plastic cover. And then fold that down to reveal our three bolts that we're gonna loosen up. So we'll take a 15mm socket to loosen them up. And now with these bolts loosened, we can go back to our crash bar and pull it out. So now we can pull forward on our bumper, slide our crash bar out, and now we can go back and tighten down our three bolts and reinstall our plastic cover. Now for this side, just make sure you don't pinch your parking sensor wire. And And then we can raise this back up into place and push our clips in. And then you can repeat that whole process on the other side. Now moving on to the rear, we need to remove our strut. So the first thing I'm going to do is support the axle with a couple of pole jacks, and then we can work on our lower strut bolt. Now once you have your axle supported by a pole jack or a jack stand, you can take a 27mm socket and 30mm wrench to remove this bolt. And then now we can just manipulate our pole jack to where we can get this bolt out. Now if you're having a little trouble getting this out, you can tap it with a hammer a couple times. Now on the other side, you can get that wrench around the flange on the bolt and tap that with a hammer. Next, we're going to remove the 3 nuts at the top of our strut. However, to be able to get access to those, we're going to have to remove these 2 clips. So you're going to grab a flathead screwdriver, you're going to hold the outer edge here to prevent it from spinning, and then you can unscrew that inner part. You don't want to put any pressure on the screwdriver because you can push that inner part back in. And then we'll just pop that out, and then do the same thing for the other one. So now we have enough access to pull back on our fender liner to be able to get to our nuts. So we'll take a 15mm ratcheting wrench to remove them. Now with all those removed, we can slide our strut out of the way, and we'll do that same thing on the other side. So now we're ready to install our new strut. So we're going to raise this up into our upper mounts and get our nuts on hand tight so we still have a little bit of maneuverability to get it into our lower mount. So now we're ready to get our bolt through our lower strut mount. Now I've got our axle off of the pole jack here, so we're able to move it up and down. We're gonna have to pull down on the axle a little bit to get this to line up to get our bolt through. And now with our bolt through, we can get our nut on the other side. And then we'll grab our 27mm socket and 30mm wrench to tighten this down. And now we can go back up top and take a 15mm ratcheting wrench to tighten down the 3 nuts. Now I like to start with the one right in front since it's easier to get to. We can tighten that down all the way, and then we'll be able to tighten the other 2 down the rest of the way by hand so we don't have to crank so much on the back 2 that are harder to get to. So now with that one tight, you can reach back and thread the other 2 the rest of the way by hand. And now the last thing we need to do is reinstall those 2 clips and tighten those down with a Phillips head screwdriver, and then we can repeat the same process on the other side. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the Rough Country 2-inch suspension lift kit for your 2021 and newer Bronco without Sasquatch package and excluding Badlands, First Edition, Raptor, and Wild Track. Thank you for watching, and for all things Bronco, keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.